Hi, friend, and welcome back to Marvelous Friends, your home for all things Marvel Cinematic Universe and beyond. I'm Rhett, and today I am going to be talking about Jessica Jones Season 3, so let's jump on into Episode 1. Roll that credit. The episode opens up on Jessica back on the case, retrieving a young girl from her father who has taken her to Mexico illegally after losing custody in a divorce. Now, the father kind of tries to explain to Jessica that the daughter is better off with him, as he kind of implies that the mother isn't such a great woman. Now, the daughter also kind of tries to hint that she'd much rather stay with her father, though this could just be because of the Mexican beach vacation they're currently on. Seems like a pretty sweet deal if you ask me and if I was her age. Now, when Jessica takes the daughter back to New York and delivers her to her mother, we then once again kind of see that maybe the father was right and that she really isn't that nice of a woman, as she quickly turns on Jessica, showing a tendency for unwarranted hostility, making Jessica wonder who was actually right and who was actually wrong in this situation and what it means to be a hero and making these decisions. I think this is going to be our theme for the majority of this season. Looking back on season 1 of the show, we definitely saw the theme was much so kind of Jessica coming to terms with who she is as a person, believing for a long time that she was evil and no good because of the control that Kilgrave had over her and what he made her do. Eventually feeling that she's come to terms with that and understanding that it was not her fault and that she herself is not internally bad because of that. Now in season 2, we saw not only her journey of an origin story, but also her journey to understand what it means to become a hero and to be that good person that she realizes she can be. Much of this kind of fueled by her mother, who wishes to see her become said hero. And actually, a very interesting comparison to be placed here between the mother we saw in episode 1 and Jessica Jones' mother in season 2. Both of them seeming to be this ideal mother, but ultimately, when it comes down to it, may not be all they seem. Now, here we'll see this kind of continue, with Jessica now trying to understand what it means to be the person who has to judge what is good and what is evil in those around her. At least that's what it seems like from this opening scene. I jumped to this very early conclusion of a theme for the season because the term sliding scale is mentioned so many times in this first episode's worth of dialogue. Now, this, of course, does typically apply to Jessica speaking about her payment style, about kind of creating a sliding scale of how she will charge her clients. But this can also be charged to kind of the judgment of morality, with good and evil falling along various kind of points of a sliding scale as people move up and down it. And we see many of the people that Jessica interacts with in this episode fall at various points. For instance, one of the first people we're introduced to is Jillian, Jessica's new assistant, who falls somewhere definitely in that kind of neutral middle ground of that scale, seeming to be very kind and open-hearted and very generous with her kind of caring nature on the phone when we first kind of see her in the background. Though as soon as that phone hangs up, she turns on a dime and shows her true indifference to everything, not caring and not wanting to be at work anymore because it is 5 o'clock, and could care less if Jessica needs any more help or anything else from her, as she just got back to the office. This continues on when she talks to Vito about her weekend plans, saying that she has social engagements to attend all weekend, but then immediately follows it up with a comment about how she doesn't care for people and is just doing it to do it. This kind of, again, showing her neutrality and everything, how she can be good, but ultimately she just doesn't care. Vito, as I mentioned, is also in this scene, and he falls somewhere in that definitely good side of things, being almost admiring of Jessica for her heroics and encouraging her along that path, and doing so almost with the innocence of a child. We next come across Malcolm, who of course is now working for Jerry at her law firm, and this brings about our next few characters that we'll check in with. Malcolm is now the fixer for Jerry's law firm, kind of handling all the dirty work that Jerry requires. Now, he of course did initially join the firm as a PI to gain experience to become his own independent PI, much like Jessica. However, we see him trying to pay off a bribe to a victim of a hit and run by one of Jerry's clients. His client actually being very much so drunk, and apparently this is the third time Malcolm has been required to do this. He obviously is not necessarily wild about this, voicing his concerns about the job having to do this both to Jerry and the client during this process. Kind of, again, showing that he is ultimately a good person and has a good moral compass, but is willing to be swayed from that out of his own ambition. Now, Jerry, we first see as she falls out of her bed, collapsing under her own weight. Remembering again, she was diagnosed with ALS back in season 2. Once she's able to get back up, she does call for Jessica, who arrives, and Jerry basically trying to pay Jessica to do a suicide pact, convincing Jessica that she doesn't want to live in this state of decay when that ultimate time comes, and so asking her to force feed her pills, causing her to die. Now, it is one of those moments that seems really dirty to Jessica, and she does not seem okay with it. Though I will say, probably season 1 Jessica would not have questioned this as much, but our much more moral season 3 version almost seems disgusted, and we're left not really knowing if Jessica actually will follow through with this if the time comes during this season. Continuing on with Jerry just a little bit, it does look like she might have a little bit of a better outlook on life and making a turn morally for good now that she has this kind of life potentially debilitating disease. Or at least it seems. In one scene that we see Jerry make a sizable donation to a foundation. Now, just so those who are not familiar with charities and foundation giving, a platinum level donation is technically usually the highest level of giving one can do. And for these fancy high-end foundations, like I'm sure this one is, that definitely probably means a 5 to 6 figure donation, which seems like a really nice thing to do, but turns out very much so on brand for Jerry. It is all for personal gain, because it turns out that the foundation director is an ex-girlfriend, one who has now moved on with her life and is married with a family, having a husband in this story. Now, of course, this isn't going to stop Jerry. She has a plan in mind, I am sure, knowing the character, and she will definitely be trying to get this woman back as the series goes on, despite her current situation with her family. I will say this, though, I hope that we do get some solid closure for the character of Jerry. She has been one of the few that have shown up in almost every single season of all the different series on Netflix, and so having her come to a real close with her story would be great, whether that is her coming to full term and coming to fully be taken over by her ALS, and maybe the suicide happening at the end, but I would like to see that solid closure and kind of cap on Jerry's story because she has been such a major player throughout all these kind of Netflix runs. Dorothy, Trish's mother, is the next character to surface, waiting for Jessica to arrive back at her office, seeming very concerned and wanting Jessica to help her find Trish, who has been missing for the last 24 hours. Now, Jessica, of course, knowing who Dorothy is, sees right through this as Dorothy is the #1 stage mom of the MCU, knowing that really and truly when it comes down to it, that Dorothy is only coming to Jessica for help because she doesn't want to go to the police. Filing a police report for a missing person would only be a PR nightmare for Trish, which is ultimately Dorothy's only concern. Something that we've seen Jessica point out for the last couple of seasons, that often Dorothy is much more concerned with Trish's PR and fame than she is for her actual well-being. Speaking of Trish, we now know that she is coming fully into terms with her Hellcat abilities. For those who do not know, in the comic books, Patsy Walker, which is Trish's stage name as a young childhood actor, is also known as Hellcat in the comics, a feline superpowered hero of New York City. The dialogue is very quick to remind us over and over again that Trish has always been Jessica's moral compass in kind of helping Jessica point to being good and doing what is right with her superpowers. Stating just that in a conversation between the two of them while Jessica interrupts Trish trying to confiscate a statue involved in an assault case, mentioning to Jessica that she no longer needs to do that as she herself can now do the good that she always hoped that Jessica would. One of my things I feel is going to be the major player here for Trish is that she will find herself kind of also looking into this whole morality scale of good and evil, coming to terms with what Jessica has known for so long, that it really isn't as black and white, a view that Trish clearly has and is something that we are constantly reminded of about the character. Despite the outward appearance of Jessica's feelings towards Trish in regards to the events at the end of season 2, where Trish shoots and kills Jessica's mother in hopes to save Jessica as the police were on the way to kill both of them, Jessica just isn't ready to forgive, but she does seem to care. Throughout several points of the early part of the episode, we see Jessica watching this late-night shopping channel with no real context to the episode and what it could mean. Perhaps it's a lead on a case or something else. But it turns out at the end of the episode we do get the answer on this, as it is normally hosted by Trish as a late-night fashion shopping show, showing that Jessica does really care and has been checking up on her this entire time to make sure she was okay. Perhaps realizing why Trish did it and actually kind of at some level forgiving her on the inside, but just not quite there vocally to actually forgive and forget. Finally, at this point, we meet Eric at the bar where Jessica is kind of drowning her sorrows from the day. He speaks on length about hamburgers here, describing the burger that Jessica is about to eat as a turd and offering to cook one of his specialty for her to give her a true hamburger experience. I will say here, he might as well be our human representation of that morality sliding scale as he talks about the good and bad and all that in quite detail in this conversation. Now, most of that, of course, talking about the hamburgers, but he also does mention that he is able to point out the foolish behavior of others during the process of betting on the drinking game going on behind the two at the bar. Now, he then, of course, convinces Jessica to let him cook this burger and returns back to her apartment to cook for her. Now, this patty making is interrupted from a knock on the door. Jessica goes to answer the door and finds behind it a masked assailant who promptly stabs her in the gut. Out of response, she throws the man backwards down the hall. He is able to then get up and get away. Jessica, though, very much so injured and trying to crawl after him. Despite this, he does, like I say, get away. Malcolm, though, does hear the commotion and quickly comes out of his apartment, calling 911 and attending to Jessica's wounds the best he can. But do you know who doesn't come out of the apartment and help Jessica? Eric, which is very suspicious considering A, he is new, and his interaction with Jessica led to the circumstances. Now, I also want to point out that we do know that the named villain for the season is Gregory Salinger, who is also known as the Fool Killer in the comics. But we also know that Eric spoke in great detail about being able to tell and point out fools during that conversation and the betting at the bar, which makes me very kind of skeptical of the character still. So it's unsure if he'll be a throwaway character or perhaps far more involved, though the picture of the gentleman that is in the opening kind of title card on Netflix for this season does include a picture of a man that slightly resembles perhaps Eric on that third Polaroid along with Trish and Jessica. But luckily Malcolm is there just back in time from his little side task of doing something not so great for potentially good reasons. Now, we just watched Malcolm before this previous scene spend the night trying to track down their client from earlier in the episode. Realizing that he's just going to continue driving drunk and do this over and over again, potentially harming more people, Malcolm decides to do something about it, putting his PI experience to work, tracking down the baseball player at a local restaurant where he is already drunk and trying to convince a woman to get into the car with him so that he can drive. Luckily, the woman is smart and decides not to do so. Never drive and drunk, and never drive with someone who you suspect drinking. Always try to make sure your friends do not drive either. Little PSA. Anyways, Malcolm follows the man as he continues to swerve in and out of lanes through the streets of New York City. Then all of a sudden, coming out of nowhere to T-bone the baseball player's car. Now in the passenger seat besides Malcolm, we do see what looks to be a for sale sign, so most likely Malcolm bought this vehicle just for this purpose, leaving both the baseball player and the cars there behind, and stumbling off and looking to limp a little bit on his way out. Now we do, of course, kind of get implied that the baseball player survives this and he's not actually dead, so that's good. But this whole scene, once again, representing that sliding scale of doing good, maybe not always for the best reasons or, or in the best means, but again, Malcolm very so representing that sliding scale of morality that I think we're going to be dealing with a lot this season. My takeaways for the season opener are pretty positive, and I'm excited to see what's going to happen. And I'm very kind of curious to see where all of our characters will kind of find their final resting place, both within this series as it is ending after this season, and on that morality scale that seemed to be very hinted at throughout the entire season. Figuring out whether they're going to be good, evil, morally right or bad, black or white. Of course, I think most of our characters along this process will realize what Jessica has so long ago, that there is no one place on that scale, and it is not so easy to point to what is right and wrong all the time. I think Trish is ultimately going to get in a lot of trouble with her whole new vigilante gig. Kind of this whole scene in this episode 1 between her and Jessica bailing her out is really going to be kind of foreshadowing to the whole kind of rest of the season and that relationship with Trish getting in over her head with being a vigilante and Jessica ultimately having to kind of save her. Now I already mentioned this as well, but I do not trust this Eric guy. This could, of course, just because I don't trust new characters right off the bat. Heck, I spent most of the last season not trusting Vito's father, Oscar, the entire time, but that wasn't completely unwarranted, but it wasn't like a sinister thing that he was hiding from Jessica at the end. But I am intrigued to see what's going to play out with that character as well. What about you? What were your thoughts for the season opener, and what do you hope to see from this season? What did you like? What did you not like from this episode? Let me know all that down in those comments. As I continue, I will be posting these videos as I get them done, hopefully doing a few of them in kind of bulk blocks. We'll see how this runs. This is my first time doing videos on a TV series run, so there's a lot more videos to talk about and a lot more to do, so hopefully I'm able to get these out pretty quickly. But to make sure you do not miss a thing, make sure to subscribe and set those alerts. In the meantime, though, I love you all 3,000. I hope you have a marvelous rest of your day. Bye, friend!